Welcome to On the Chain.
I wanted to show this, Jeff, because you kind of teased this a little bit in the opener, but let's jump right into this because this is something that XRP Boy, real XRP Boy, which is at boy_XRP, tweeted this out. And of course, I went over on Quora and found it. But it said, now someone put this on Quora. If you guys don't know Quora is a way, it's like you put questions out there and people can answer the questions. And David Schwartz is actually fairly active on Quora. And somebody put this up there. It said, since XRP is working alongside the established financial system, is it plausible that the U.S. Federal Reserve may take ownership of XRP and the Ripple network becoming XRP kind of digital USD? And it's interesting, Jeff, because this has come up so much, even in the chat over the months, over the years, people, bringing this up. It's come up on other YouTubers' videos. It's something we've discussed pretty often. And this was answered a year ago, but again, I hadn't seen it. And the author has 10.6 thousand answers and 15 million answer views. That's incredible, Jeff. Think about that.
It really is. So XRP, a kind of digital USD. It's an interesting title, kind of diving right into it. And man, there's so much going on, like you'd mentioned. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation over this fact that is or are we at a point where government agency are looking at some of these digital assets and trying to figure out a way to maybe take a little bit more control over those digital assets, maybe get a little bit of long-term benefit off those digital assets, or maybe it's the fact that they realize that this is future money and they don't want the public to have control over the sovereignty of money. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, what it really says and what somebody's really thinking about here is the value. There is serious value there. And I think, if we look at the thumbnail, XRP is new money. You think about that, it really is, because it has a value, it has a use case. And so, if we're looking at the way the UK looks at this, it ticks two of those boxes, that it has a use case and it also is a currency. So it really is the new money. And then so David Schwartz gets into it and says, in referring to the Federal Reserve could take possession of Ripple's private network, but there's really no way they could take possession of XRP or the XRP ledger. Jeff, why is that? Why couldn't they take possession of XRP or the ledger?
Yeah, so how do you take control of something that's decentralized? But more than that, Shiv, how do you take control of something that is decentralized on an international scale?
Right.
Unless they go in and they try to figure out a way that they can take possession of the escrow of the 55 or 50 billion, whatever's left in that escrow account. But then you run into the exact same problems.
Right. But there's also a percentage of that has rules about how that is it possible? Yeah. And given what's happened over the last 2 years, I would say almost anything is possible, right? An invasion from another planet, the moon crashing into the sun. Who knows? I mean, at this point, I think it's all possible. He goes on to say that they could create their own copy of the system, just as they could with any other public ledger system, but then they'd have to compete with systems like Bitcoin and the XRP ledger. If the value of these systems comes from their decentralization, then why would people want to use one owned by the Federal Reserve? Now, Jeff, what are your thoughts about that? Because that right there is an interesting question.
It really is an interesting question. And so there's a little bit of a dichotomy here, because think about it from a perspective of those that are into the crypto space, right? Those, if they're looking at Bitcoin, they're looking at Ethereum, they're looking at even XLM, let's say they go to Stellar, looking at, I don't know, one of the other, thousands of assets out there, the ledgers, and say, hey, you know what? We want to find a way to separate out of the this control mechanism of a non-government entity, or so here's the other side of it, is the rest of the public. So you have those that are saying, hey, you know what, we want to get away from the banks and we think we can do it through private means, and that the whole concept of where Bitcoin started. And then you have the other group within the public that says, hey, you know what, we love this idea of digital asset, but we like the protection of it being controlled and operated by the Federal Reserve. and overseen somehow through government dictate.
Exactly. And I wanted to say shout out to Sooner and Swiffle for the super sticker. Really appreciate that, guys. And there's a couple other comments I want to get your thoughts on, Jeff. Like this one here from Jim D. He said, well, the Fed Treasury can set up their own private trust network, but cannot change the total coinage count like do on a whim with their junk fiat Ponzi scheme. Just print some more.
And that's exactly, you know, that's a really solid point from Jim D. And by the way, Jim D is a brand new member of On the Chain. Look at that, with his brand new shiny membership there.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So that's great. But that's a really solid point, because here's one where you see that the government through the Federal Reserve printing our money value into obscurity, as also, you know, spending and printing direct causation of rampant inflation. You know, so here you have an issue, right? So to his point, you know, this junk fiat Ponzi scheme is what we're starting to see that it's kind of spun into. But if they take over, let's say the XRPL, that's it. You know, they're kind of limited in the total count of XRP. Same thing with Bitcoin. You take control of the Bitcoin, but you know what? With each one of these assets, you can look at the value down to a decimal point.
Right.
So it's not that they can't keep printing, but the value's there, you know. And if you're going to break it down to a decimal point, does one XRP equal $1, or does one, you know, 0.0001 of a drop or something like that equal $1? You know, how do you factor that in? And same thing with a Bitcoin. You get to you know, 0.0000000th of a Bitcoin.
Well, Captain Redbeard says just burn it. I think he's referring to the escrow. So he's maybe referring to that's something the escrow could do. Jim D also says Ripple could hold the Fed hostage by burning the escrow. They could also license a new Fed coin context using Ripple software license. That's all possible, but I do believe there are rules. But because of the validators, because of the way they release from the escrow $1 million per month, I believe that they'd have to put an amendment to the validators to get 80% consensus on it before moving forward. So I don't think it's as easy as we push a button. The Fed pushes a button and prints money. That's pretty easy. So remember that, what was that a couple years ago, Jeff? They had that big easy button. I think everyone had one of those at one point. You just clicked it and it said that was easy.
Solves problems. But no, you're right with that. You know, on the escrow, they can't just step in and say, hey, we want you to burn the escrow, or we're taking control of the escrow, you know, through the mechanism. You know, they would have to have the validators vote on the change and also vote on the burning of it. So Ripple isn't in control of whether or not they're going to burn it or not. But the question then is, if as part of the release of the escrow, they're releasing 1 billion every single month, and then the unused portion is then rolled over to the 55th month, and it keeps going that way, always put at the end, and it continues. So the question is then, can the Fed, and I don't know the answer to this one, but can the Fed come in through some form of dictate and, you know, then take that release? Is there a way for them to nationalize that 1 billion release? They say, okay, 1 billion is released, we're going to take it.
Yeah, but I mean, see, I don't under what kind of law? I mean, there are still laws in that, right? You can't have a complete takeover,
right?
Well, I mean, but still, I mean, you know, you can't have the government go into a private company and just take it. Otherwise, that starts looking like something from the 1930s, early 1940s that happened, and it looked like a little bit like what happened in Venezuela, where all the private companies were, you know, the government came in and took it over, and it happened in Cuba and it happened in other places. Can it happen? It's happened plenty of times before. It happened in Germany as well. So I just don't know under what scenario that would look like. Not saying it couldn't happen. See that, but I just wanted to finish up with this, that David Schwartz finishes it up on the comments saying the design of public blockchain systems makes a lot of engineering sacrifices precisely to ensure that they can't be taken over or censored. They have no administrative functions. It wouldn't make sense to take over an existing system and completely destroy its value proposition. Unless, of course, if there's one of those out there that's the big brand name, Bitcoin, And that is a threat to all central banks, because it's interesting to see how you see El Salvador leading the way and other countries getting down with the whole Bitcoin as currency. And this isn't a conversation about what you think about Bitcoin or other digital assets. This is a conversation of digital assets in the forefront, and also creating that sort of threat. Because if you say that it's a currency, then guess what follows? Other digital assets are to follow, and other ones that have different use cases and properties come after that. So as we start seeing more countries adopt the whole idea of Bitcoin being a currency, it's basically the carte blanche stamp for everything that's digital asset also potentially being a currency.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.